Dear friends and listeners, in this video I talk about some social phenomena through astrology, and I intend to make more videos like this in the future. We all feel that something big is happening, but it is not easy to formulate what it is. So in the videos like this, we'll talk about the specifics of our time and the changes we are going through. In January 2020, the first and the only exact conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn will occur, which is extremely important to all people of this world and which indicates a turning point in the world political and economic relations. Just that's the turning point that we all feel. And I would like only to make clear what is the conjunction. The conjunction is in astrology when two planets meet at the same point. They are together from the astrological point of view. However, this conjunction is certainly one of the hardest one that exists. Unfortunately, I have to say that. So we will talk about this conjunction as other astrologers talk about that in many videos until the end of the year 2019, and especially during the year 2020. This will be the big subject. So I'm going to especially talk about what it is good and what is potentially bad about the upcoming three conjunctions. There are going to be three different conjunctions in Capricorn next year. In this video, I will talk first and foremost about Pluto. So there is an old saying is if Pluto is your friend, you do not need an enemy. So let's see briefly why is it so. So Pluto has been in Capricorn since the year 2008, and since that time we are going through the so-called economic crisis, which is actually used by bankers and other world powers to in order to gain more wealth. They are using this crisis to become more wealth. While they're gaining more wealth, the transit is devastating for majority of people globally. Especially when we see the prices of houses and real estate and in many other fields. It's devastating for nature also and so on. So we need to explain why this transit is devastating and how useful can be. Can it be useful? I already talked about this in a video named Saturn in Capricorn. So I suggest you to watch it because it describes one of the key transits of our time. It is not useful to talk about Pluto in Capricorn as about the bad transit. It is much better to understand it. What people call bad transit, let me say that, can even be called unconsciously experienced transit. Also, the term positive transit that many astrologers use should be replaced by the phrase consciously integrated transit or easily consciously integrated transit. I suppose you understand what I'm talking here about. There are no bad transits in astrology, but there are groups of people in the world that are not conscious. So it is easy to turn those so-called bad transits into hell and to produce large-scale destructions instead of accepting the change, which is the key thing. So it is better not to talk about good and bad transits, but to talk about transits that are easy to integrate and about difficult and serious transits that are more difficult to integrate because they are looking for profound transformations of individuals, nations, organizations, and so on. You all know most probably from your life, your personal life, that so-called good transits haven't done you any good. I'm sure you know that. Why is it so? Well, because you were relaxing at that time, you were feeling fine at that time, because those energies who were around you were very easy to accept, They didn't ask you to do much job. And you also know that the so-called bad transits have made you mess of your life. So why is it so? Because you didn't want to think that about that period of your life as in a serious way. You didn't want to accept necessarily changes. You didn't want to understand that everything is temporary and eventually accept the defeat or pain. I know it's not easy to accept it. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying what should be done. However, many people are going through very bad and difficult transits, bad transits or difficult, and they're doing fine. Why? Because they know what to do. They know how to accept what is coming. We can even say they're realistic, they're flexible, call it as you want. They're not afraid and so on. We'll talk about that more. So now we are talking about Pluto because Pluto is going to make the conjunction with Saturn in the Capricorn sign in January 2020. To remind you, they have been making opposition, not the conjunction. This is another aspect, opposition, standing opposite to each other. During the September 11th, 2001, when the Twin Towers or World Trade Center in New York were demolished. So this was happening with the opposition. Since the destruction of the Twin Towers, especially security measures are being started in the world, but behind this is actually hidden intention of controlling people. So those special security measures did not start to secure people, they started to control people actually. It was used in these purposes, for these purposes. After that, a new fight against terrorism begins. You know, one thing happened and then control, and then now we need to fight against terrorism, which is of course just a farce. And it's a very dangerous project of people who have power in the world. So in January 2020, Pluto and Saturn will make the conjunction, which means that, that the communication of those two planets will be even more intense and perhaps even more devastating. In January or around this month, there can be another major incident, which would then be the new reason for establishing even greater control over people, and what can further on lead to changes on the micro plan that will be crucial for the development of humankind in the next 30 or 235 years. Why I'm saying those cycles? Because next 30 years will mean new cycle of Saturn closing, and next 235 years will mean new cycle of the Pluto closes. To clarify, Saturn and Pluto will meet again in 2053, but that will be in Pisces. Of course, they will not discuss in that time, I mean, metaphorically saying, discuss the ruling world structures. They will be more about new ways of healing or spirituality and other things. But Pluto and Saturn will meet in Capricorn again in 2255 year, in that year, but they will not even make exact conjunction. So yes, they will meet again in 235 years, but without making conjunction. So this time is even stronger than that will come in 200 years and more. I'm not going to talk more about those conjunctions, that we will talk about in the next videos, so some of the videos that will come. But it's important to know that really meeting of Saturn and Pluto in the January 2020 is really something very special. And I just emphasize here that the conjunction in Capricorn will affect the changes in the world structures, ruling structures. It is very much connected with those who are governing the world and actually deciding about political and economical situations, because this is what those archetypes mean in Capricorn. We can even say that in 2020 the foundations are being created for the future existence of a man. Pluto is in Capricorn since 2008 and it will be there until 2024. Capricorn is a sign of social structures, state, social institution, and not only one state, but the world institutions and organization. Capricorn is the sign of law, and of all that is permanent and conservative in society. And Saturn, the ruler planet of Capricorn, which is similar, they are similar, is meeting with Pluto. So we are talking here about the major changes that are concerning all of those mentioned archetypes. I'm not talking here about individual horoscopes, personal horoscopes. So please do not associate this exposure with your horoscope. It is about the energies that are so powerful that they're changing the world and that rarely affect individuals. If they affect, we will talk about that in some other video. So let's now see what is the Pluto story. In astronomy, Pluto is the farthest planet in the solar system, and as mythology tells, Pluto is the ruler of hell, of the underworld. It is the secret ruler that no one has seen ever, because he rarely leaves his underworld empire or kingdom, and when he leaves his kingdom, he wears helmet and mask, so no one has ever seen his face. And that very much reminds us, of course, of some social world structures that are talking about quite a lot in the last years in the internet, those hidden, you never see them, but you know that they rule something and so on. That's Pluto. If you saw the intro image of this video, you saw that I set the sun on the top and planets down, so vertically. I put the picture where I put vertically solar system. It's usually presented horizontally, but I switched it. I put it vertically. So the sun is on the top. So the sun is up and the Pluto is down on that picture. So those who understand astrology know that the closer planet is to the sun, it is easier to integrate its energy, and the farther is from the sun, it's more difficult to manage this energy. And on that picture you see that Mercury is, for example, close to the sun, and we don't have problem with Mercury. It's so easy to deal with this energy. But Pluto is down, it is the farthest planet from the sun, and it is the hardest energy for us to understand, integrate, or sublimate. Of course, this position of the solar system needs more explanations, and I will talk about that some other time. What astrology says about Pluto is that it is a planet of death, violence, control, serious illnesses, and obsessions. It represents the end of something, but also regeneration, new birth, and the deepest transformation. Where Pluto goes in your horoscope, especially if it conjuncts some of the personal planets, one part of you dies, it can be said like that, and then some deepest possible transformation comes, such that you feel actually that you are like born again. It is usually a process that takes many years, and if you ask me in personal horoscopes how many years, let me say it is minimum 5 years and very often 10 to 15 years. Unfortunately, we often have to go through the darkness as individuals or as a collective to regenerate and to transform, because we cannot otherwise interact with this power of the universe. Perhaps it is possible, but we don't have any better way. I don't know how would that be. So Pluto's energy can best be understood by looking at the nature. This is interesting. Every year nature is born and dies, and it's reborn again, and it dies again. But it's never exactly the same as it was in the previous year. So this law is valid, this law that works for the nature, is valid also in human life. These are not to say only regenerative and evolutionary biological laws, but they are universal laws that are actually part of every area of a human life, or of the life, if you say life of universe, existence of universe. This law is general and universal. So Pluto says that everything has its end. But the only form dies. Life itself moves on. From a psychological and astropsychological point of view, Pluto is also a planet of fear, neurosis, and psychosis. So why do those phenomena and this illness occur? They are the consequence of insincerity, in a way to say, to speak. They occur as a result of repressed feelings, repressed conditions also, that one does not want to see or does not want to accept. Maybe he feels that it's there, but he doesn't want it. So it's a way he's insincere with himself. Many diseases, especially panic attacks, that are one of the major diseases of our time, means that a person refuses to enter into the deeper layers of his being, and to see the truth about him, herself, and to accept it. So one refuses to see the reality of himself or of herself, and refuses to be real about his expectations or his desires also. This is also the true about collective. For example, now in our time, one part of the collective, and above all, this is the part that rules people, represented by Capricorn, does not want to accept that Pluto has come to make the end, which is why there has been so much war, bombing, and fighting in the last 20 years. So much wars were happening in the last years. It looks as if Pluto himself appeared from his underworld kingdom to say that it is over, but they are still struggling to maintain power. Pluto is uh, Pluto is very special energy because it is feared by those who are ruling the world, but it is also feared by those who are controlled by the world powers. So fear is the greatest theme of our time. And I'm saying that's why there are so many people who are suffering of panic attacks. In Freud's time, when psychologist Freud invented psychology, he lived in Vienna, in Austro-Hungary. He was, in his time, the most common psychiatric illness was hysteria. And people were hysterical in that time also because it was the end of one empire, So we are going to a similar process in a way. So you wonder when the fears stop. Well, it stops when a person, collective, or a system managers and others who are involved realize that the end of something is inevitable. We know that the greatest fear of a man is the fear of death. Why is it so? Because many do not understand what death is. And this fear of death is quite successfully transcended by cultures and societies and religions that speak about reincarnation. The phenomenon of reincarnation is closely associated with Pluto, and perhaps we can't imagine the spiritual life without this concept. But we have not yet said that in astrology, Pluto is also a symbol of wealth, a symbol of power of wealth. The name Pluto is paraphrase of the god Hades and means the god of wealth. Where in antique time, when they didn't want to say the word Hades because they were afraid, they were saying the one who has wealth, the one who is wealthy. And they said by saying Pluto. See, so he has all the wealth of the underworld, to remind petroleum too. Petroleum, that's Pluto's resource. Of course, diamonds, gold, and everything that people are fighting about in today's time. Pluto has it in mythology. So as soon as Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, it triggered global economic crisis because it turned out that the world powers and world governing structures were not enough rich, they were not enough powerful, they did not realize they don't have enough money, so they fight even more for their money. And they, of course, start teaching everybody else that fighting for the money is the most important thing in life. So we are talking about plutocracy right now, when Pluto is in Capricorn, We are not talking about plutocracy when Pluto is in any other sign. So plutocracy is the power of money, and it means that somebody is ruling by using money. Yes, and as we said many times, Capricorn is the sign of highest state and world ruling structures. Pluto in Capricorn shows that politicians are mafia, because Capricorn again symbolizes official state and similar official institutions, and Pluto symbolizes everything that is hidden, connected with money, violence, with control, terrorization, or we say underworld. So it's mafia. So those who rule are mafia. But some may wonder, what am I talking about? Yes, because they think that live in democracy, not in plutocracy. Well, that's what media say every day. They constantly repeat democracy, especially in the Western media, in Western countries. But it is not true. The largest population in the world does not live in democracy. There is no democracy. People live in plutocracy. There are different forms of government, such as autocracy, theocracy, and so on. But we live in plutocracy, unfortunately. And what follows is even more interesting, because that what follows is technocracy, and I will talk about that later. So plutocracy is the rule of money and power, as dictionary says, but we have to add something that we know from mythology and astrology. The plutocracy is actually also ruling by control and by using fear, which further means suppressing the freedom of a man, because a controlled man who fights and works for the sake of one's wealth is not a free man. So if we were to ask ourselves how long humanity has lived in plutocracy, we will go further and further and perhaps reach the Neolithic time, a period known, for example, in Serbia, where I'm from. This period of Neolithic time is known as Vinčan culture. This culture was flourishing in the territory of Serbia, and it was war-free period of 2000 years. So the time of Vinča culture is a period of time that existed. It is not true that we can't live without wars. We can, and there is a proof in the history. So plutocracy is not a form of government that emerged yesterday, not after the World War II. We speak here about a long period of time, and of course it was a period when plutocracy was more and less intense. But now it is interesting why we speak so much about that, because it's so visible. And it is so visible because it comes into crisis. We are now witnessing the creation of a new world paradigm, which of course will be fragile and likely to be created for hundreds of years in the future, whatever it will be. No, we don't know what it will be. This is what we are talking about. Yes, it is that it's funny what ruling structures are doing, to keep things going as before. In addition to that, that they are accepting decadence as normal and teaching people that. In addition to that, that they are convincing us through media that killing is healthy and bombing is human. They even try to throw Pluto out of the solar system by saying that it's not a planet or it does not exist, because they know what they are actually fighting about. They are fighting about the power that is symbolized by Pluto, so they are destroying the planet, which is of course ridiculous. Pluto is similar to the goddess Kali in Indian tradition. Kali symbolizes death. We cannot, we can connect Kali, what Kali means in Indian tradition, we can connect also with the period of time that they are talking about. This is one-time cycle. They call it period of Kali Yuga. You most probably know about this. It is a long period of hundreds of thousands of years in which human society is now in. It is the lowest point of development of humankind. And according to some, the wheel is already moving, and we are going through the first indications of change, going out from the Kali Yuga. Maybe it is so. I'm not one who can discuss this. I don't have enough knowledge for this. Pluto in its symbolism is also similar to the deity Shiva in Indian astrology, the third power that drives the world. There are three powers besides Brahma and Vishnu, So it is known, those three powers are known as Trimurti, three powers. Brahma creates, Vishnu maintains life, and Shiva destroys it. And this is how the energy circulates. The same, actually, trinity existed in Vedic culture. So Shiva is the destructive force, and of course it attracts the attention of us now when we speak about that, because there are more and more Shivaists, even in India and in the world, of course, in today's time. Even the favorite guru, whose name I will not mention here, is the Shivaist. I want to warn that Shivaism is something foreign to Slavic people and to people who are evolving from Vedic culture. Shivaism has cults that are completely inverse to our Slavic and Vedic tradition and essentially celebrates the underground forces of that, unlike the Vedic and Slavic traditions that celebrate life and the force of light. Well-known symbols of those two opposed traditions are eagle and the serpent. Eagle is the force of light, serpent is the force of death. Be careful about this. Many researchers, writers, and today engaged people who overemphasize, for example, sexuality, the importance of female principle, who use in today's time the symbol of snake and the like, are in fact Shivaists without even knowing it. That's important to know. I'm not saying we should abandon this another force. No, we should know and respect it. But it's important what is the most important power that we believe in. So let's say one more thing about Pluto. Pluto is the planet of sexuality. So in our time, it is more important topic than maybe it should be. And sexual deviations are imposed as normal, which has always been a sign of degeneration and as a mass phenomenon in society have meant the end of civilization. So maybe you are now wondering what an ordinary man can do with this today. Well, the generation should not be accepted, it should not be given to it much importance. It is forced to us in today's time to accept it. We have a right to refuse it, we don't need to make panic about that. We just say it's not for me. And to do that, many of us will need to isolate in some way. I'm not saying here so much we need to isolate in a physical way. Maybe that will be also the case in the future. But I mean mainly mentally in an energetic sense, because the generation is infectious, just as it is the energy of Pluto. Pluto is attractive in many ways. So it has some kind of magnetism that attracts people because it intrigates man's hidden and weak places, maybe even dark places in himself, which is difficult to understand, difficult to integrate, difficult to sublimate. So one can easily find himself in the clashes of this degenerative energy. The magnetism of Pluto is part of sexuality, so it can be healthy, but it can be also very unhealthy. Depends what we do with that. To summarize what's wrong and what is good with Pluto, it's best to fight against the change. Those who do so will inevitably fall into the diseases, severe deformations, and degeneration. The answer to this is that one needs to, in a way, consciously ignore those deformations. It means to know about it and not to accept it. It's maybe good not to listen to the news, to isolate in a way, to preserve some common sense and common values, to be with same-minded people, to work on personal awareness, which often means to have knowledge and to transform oneself with the help of new knowledge. We really need new knowledge to know what is happening. I mentioned also in this video at the beginning the technocracy. The technocracy that I think it follows after the plutocracy is exhausted. So when will this be, you're asking? Well, it will be as early as 2023-24 year appears, when Pluto enters the Aquarius sign, and when it tries to control the masses with new technology. This can be, of course, perfect time for the development of societies in the world. It can be also devastating in a new way. So from plutocracy to technocracy, and this transitional phase can be especially dangerous because the two forms of government will come together. And when we know from historic time, I can't explain that now in details, but when one ruling power or the way of rulership finishes and the other one is starting, then in any form, then it's a very messy time. It is positive in a way because many new things can emerge, but it can be also very chaotic. So, as we said, how the devastating consequences of those two regimes united can be avoided by making people to be aware. I will talk about technocracy in a separate video, but I will also say that it will come to some sort of polarization in the world, as it did in the 20th century, sometime after the Second World War. It is likely that in one part of the world, people will be controlled by modern technology, and the other part will more enjoy the benefits of new technology. So the technology is there for both. It is only used in a different way by differently aware individuals and societies. And that's all for today. Shortly about plutocracy. I talk more about technocracy in some of the following videos as about the conjunctions in Capricorn. In this video, I did not talk about the impact of Pluto in the lives of individuals, but if you want to schedule a personal consultations with me on this topic or any other topic, please do it, feel free to do it. All my contacts are below this video on YouTube. There are also recommended videos, seminars, and there is a link to an online astrology course that I offer in English. It is the course of astrology for beginners, so you may decide to learn online with me. If you like the video, like it, forward it, subscribe to my channel, and thank you very much for that. Stay well and see you soon.